He can be replaced anytime. Chris had used me, looked down on me, and scolded me. My pride was in shambles. But one day, a turning point came, and my situation changed. Starting today, I've been appointed the new CEO. What? Chris, the manager who always looked down on me, boasted about becoming the next CEO and strutted around arrogantly, unlike me, who quietly did my job, I thought. But his time was running out. Soon, I'll bring him back to reality so completely that he won't be able to recover. I'll make him regret all the suffering he's caused me. I am Jack Moe, a single dedicated businessman working for a local company, Sons Corporation. I lead a busy life. Since joining the company, I've worked diligently without complaining, and now I'm in my mid-40s. With more young employees joining and getting promoted one after another, I paid no attention to promotions and just focused on my work. Some people ask if I have any hobbies outside of work, but to me, work is like a hobby. A workaholic. I've been called that, but I take it as a compliment. Colleagues, subordinates, and even bosses often rely on me if they have any issues, whether it's work problems or interpersonal relationships. I believe it's my job to listen and guide them to solutions. Creating a better work environment for everyone is also important. I'm not exactly a behind-the-scenes hero, but if it's for the company, I'm satisfied with that. One day, a man named Chris came from headquarters. I'm Chris, the manager who will soon become this company's president. Things won't be the same now that I'm here. Prepare to be driven hard. Chris, who is a decade younger than me, is already a manager. It seems the company has high expectations for him. Maybe that's why he can even claim he'll become the president. Listen to the future president's orders properly, otherwise I'll put you on the fast track to being laid off. Unlike me, he has momentum and a strong presence that pulls everyone along. However, his attitude and words feel completely off, but my work doesn't change. I'll just keep doing the tasks given to me, as always. But Chris didn't approve of that. Hey, old man, is this all you can do? Just things anyone could do, he snapped. No, I'm just doing my job. How is that a job? Even a kid could do that. You're no better than a salary thief, he sneered. He made snide remarks about my work. It was the first time anyone had said such things to me, and I couldn't help but pause. Look around. Everyone here is younger than you and eager for promotions. When there's someone who can't do the job, it kills everyone's motivation. Just get out of here, Chris added. Why did he have to say so much on our first meeting? I was just doing my job, as usual. Chris would also loudly mock me whenever he had the chance. He called me incompetent, a hindrance, and unnecessary for the company. It was no longer just snide remarks but outright abuse. Other employees avoided making eye contact with Chris, fearing they would become his next target. Everyone must have thought the same thing. An awful man had joined the team. From that day on, Chris constantly belittled and reprimanded me. Oh, it stinks in here. This department reeks of old man smell. It's unbearable. No wonder no one can concentrate on work. He'd yell. This kind of task should have been finished yesterday. Stop making me so angry. If you can't do your job properly, we don't need you here. Pack up and get out. Since Chris's arrival, this kind of abuse happened daily, and a dark shadow began to fall over my heart. Even my coworkers started looking at me with disdain. I just took it all without saying anything back. The juniors who looked up to me, my colleagues, and even my boss all nodded at Chris's words and gave me cold looks. I became afraid to make eye contact with anyone, and everyone at the company became a source of fear. I grew paranoid, wondering if they were bad-mouthing me behind my back. Before I knew it, I couldn't even walk in front of people anymore, and I started to distance myself from others. Naturally, this affected my work, and mistakes piled up. Chris took every opportunity to reprimand me. Each time, my heart would race, and sweat would pour from my forehead. Don't spill your filth and dirty the company. At this point, you're just a piece of junk, he said with a laugh, and I could hear others snickering too. Chris claimed he would train me to be competent and dumped a massive workload on me. While everyone else left on time, I was the only one working late. By the time I finally finished and left the office, it was past 9 p.m. On my usual way home, I passed by a small park that I usually just walked past. This time, I felt drawn to a bench and sat down with a deep sigh. Tears began to flow. At that moment, an elderly man approached me. "You okay?" "At this hour, anyone in the park must be homeless," he said. I wanted to be alone. I was about to hand him some money to make him leave, but instead, the old man sat beside me and offered me a handkerchief. The handkerchief was well worn and had holes in it. "Thank you," I said as I wiped my tears with the handkerchief. I thought he would ask what happened, but he just sat there quietly, watching the scenery with me. Then he slowly stood up. "I'm meeting my wife now. See you again," he said and walked away. Clutching the old man's handkerchief, I headed home. My apartment is about a 30-minute walk from the company. When I got to my apartment, I thought about the old man. He seemed to be in his 70s with white hair, a gentle demeanor, and a kind voice. He was very calm and composed. Who could he be? Looking at the handkerchief, there was nothing to reveal anything about the old man. "I wonder if I'll see him again," I muttered to myself. A month passed, and I started meeting the old man regularly at the same time and in the same park as before. I thought it would be rude to ask too many personal questions, so I didn't. The old man, named Charles Anderson, was in his 70s and still working, though not in a traditional office setting. It must be tough for someone in their 70s to work physically demanding jobs. "Health is the most important thing after all," I said. "Health is important, but I never thought it was tough. I love my current job," Mr. Anderson replied. Seeing Mr. Anderson talk so happily made me look down involuntarily. "Do you dislike your job?" he asked. "I like it, but right now, I hate it." I told Mr. Anderson about everything that had happened to me, how I've always been the most dedicated to my work, and how this company is very important to me, and I want to repay it through my work. But when my boss, Chris, arrived, all my efforts seemed meaningless. Every word he said made me feel more frustrated, and I was on the verge of tears. Mr. Anderson, who had been listening silently, slowly began to speak. "I can deeply understand your feelings, your passion and sincerity for your work, and your love for the company. For the past month, Chris had been dumping a massive amount of work on me under the guise of training. As a result, working on weekends and overtime became the norm." Mr. Anderson continued speaking as I looked down. "He's a terrible boss. I've worked hard up until now, but it's time to end it. Are you quitting?" I didn't respond to Mr. Anderson's question. I checked the time on my watch. "I should be going. I'm sorry for burdening you with my troubles. It's a shame. I think you're indispensable to the company." Mr. Anderson's words made me feel momentarily confused. "I'm not that kind of person," I muttered softly and left. When I got to my apartment, I plopped down on the sofa and remembered Mr. Anderson's words. I'm not that kind of person. I sat up and placed a piece of paper on the table. It was my resignation letter. I had written it a week after Chris arrived. At the time, I never thought I would actually submit it, but now things were different. I had made up my mind to quit. If Chris hadn't come, this wouldn't be happening. The next day, my resignation letter was in my bag. It was my last day at work. "Good morning, manager. Do you have a moment? I need to talk to you." "What is it? Are you quitting?" Chris responded nonchalantly. "Is that so? Finally made up your mind. I've been eagerly waiting for you to leave." He extended his hand with a big grin, urging me to hand over the resignation letter. As I pulled the letter from my bag, he said, "There are plenty of replacements for incompetents like you." Hearing his words, a surge of anger welled up from deep within me. Who does he think caused all this? I clenched my fists tightly. I will never forgive him. At least one punch to this man's face. At that moment, my phone rang with a call from an unknown number. "Hey, it's annoying," I muttered as I stepped into the hallway to answer the call. I was shocked to find out who was on the other end. The person on the phone asked me to come to a certain place immediately, right now. But I hesitated and turned around to find Chris behind me. "You're not part of this company anymore. Get lost." If I stayed any longer and he said anything more, I might really lose control. "Thank you for everything," I said as I left. Those words were my farewell as I walked away from the company. I headed straight to the meeting place mentioned on the call. It was the small park. "Not here yet," I thought as I sat on the usual bench and closed my eyes. Everything that had happened so far flashed through my mind. I had just left the company I worked for so long. No regrets. I kept telling myself, this was for the best. "You don't look like someone who just quit. Are you having second thoughts?" It was Mr. Anderson. I was supposed to arrive earlier, but he needed some time to prepare. The person on the phone was Mr. Anderson. I wondered. "I just got here too. But Mr. Anderson, what's with the outfit?" This Mr. Anderson was dressed in a high-end suit, looking like a completely different person. "I didn't mean to surprise you, but I thought it was necessary for your sake." I couldn't understand what he meant, and then Mr. Anderson said something unbelievable. It left me speechless. The next day, even though I had just quit my job, I found myself heading back to the company. Normally, this would be ridiculous, but this wasn't a normal situation. I had no idea what was going to happen next. When I arrived at the company, I got out of the car and walked inside. The employees looked at me with surprise and started whispering. Then Chris arrived at work. "Jack, good morning. What are you doing here? You quit, so get lost." Just seeing Chris made my body tense up. "I'm sorry, but it's you who should be leaving." "What did you say?" Chris snarled. Mr. Anderson, who was behind me, interjected sharply. "I saw you earlier talking to the receptionist. This isn't the place for that. You seem to think this is a bar or something." "What did you say?" Chris, showing his anger, stormed toward Mr. Anderson with a furious expression. Seeing this, I hurriedly stepped between them. "Please stop. You useless idiot. Stay out of my way." Chris shifted his target to me and grabbed my collar tightly. "Don't get cocky, you." At that moment, he noticed the suit I was wearing, and his expression changed. "Why are you wearing such a high-end luxury suit? A president should dress appropriately." Mr. Anderson cut in, "And your way of speaking is far from commendable." "What? President?" Mr. Anderson looked at me and nodded deeply. "Effective today, he's been appointed the new president." "What? Didn't you hear? This is the new president of the company, Mr. Jack." Chris seemed unable to comprehend what was happening. It was understandable. The subordinate he looked down on just yesterday was now standing before him as the president. "You've got to be kidding. Why is someone like him the new president? I'm the one who deserves to be president." "The fact that you're claiming to be suitable for the role reveals your true character," Mr. Anderson replied calmly. "What did you say?" "Oh, did I hurt that high pride of yours?" "I haven't said anything wrong." Chris's face turned bright red. "Mr. Anderson, let's stop here," I said. "Manager Chris, Jack, wake up already. Your arrogant attitude and words are driving people away and causing significant losses to the company." "Losses? Why would I be responsible for that?" Chris shot back. Recently, the company's performance had been declining, and it started when Chris arrived. Why did this happen? The reason is simple. Chris looked down on everyone and treated them like they were beneath him. He acted as if he were the most important person. The employees who worked in that environment grew to despise it, which lowered their motivation. As a result, the company's profits gradually declined. Well, even if I didn't, as a manager, it's your responsibility to keep track of the company's profits daily. Not doing so is inexcusable. It's equivalent to abandoning your duties. I'm not at fault. It's all those incompetent people, Chris exclaimed. He's the typical example of someone who can't see his own faults. To Chris, it's always someone else's responsibility. Mr. Anderson sighed deeply. Talking to him is pointless. President Jack, he must be held accountable. We should decide on his punishment at the next board meeting. Yes, that's a good idea, I agreed. Right after Chris apologized. I'm so sorry. I'll make sure this never happens again, and will speak to everyone about it. Please, don't punish me. Even if you stay, you won't change. That's evident from your past behavior. Accept it. Chris was left stunned and defeated. President Jack, You must be exhausted on your first day. This will change the atmosphere in the company and naturally restore everyone's motivation. I never expected such a situation on my first day as president, but in the end, it was for the best for everyone and the company. Mr. Anderson spoke with satisfaction. But one thing still bothered me. Why me? Why, you ask? There must have been others more suitable for the role of president than me. So why? Mr. Anderson narrowed his white-haired eyebrows. We had decided to welcome you as president for a long time. It was my wife's strong wish. Your wife's. Mr. Anderson began to speak slowly about the past. It was about 50 years ago. At that time, newlywed, I was running around to start a company. At the age of 20, I established Sons Corporation with a small team. We gradually expanded, increasing staff with new graduates and mid-career hires. 30 years later, it had grown into a company with over 500 employees. We set up headquarters in the city and were about to develop further when it happened. My wife had always been physically weak. She couldn't go out, let alone work. I see, but what did your wife do when you started the company? I was always by her side. I left all on-site work to other employees and worked from home. So although I was the president, I never showed my face at the company. Only a few top executives knew what I looked like. No wonder I had never seen him before. I had heard there was a president, but I had never seen his face since I joined the company. People around called him the ghost president. Mr. Anderson laughed as he spoke, but his eyes looked lonely. It was just when we were about to expand. My wife's health worsened. When I turned 50, my wife passed away. The sorrow of losing his wife led Mr. Anderson to overwork himself, and eventually the strain took its toll on his body. Even working from home, my body couldn't handle the stress. I cut back on sleep and handled all the work by myself. The burden was immense. Mr. Anderson shared these memories slowly. After losing my wife, my body and mind were not in good shape. I should have known that pushing myself would only make things worse. It's pathetic. In that case, shouldn't you have appointed someone else as president earlier? Why wait until now? Mr. Anderson began to explain why he chose me as the president. It all started when I told my wife about you before she passed away. At that time, I had just graduated high school and wanted to work instead of going to college. I was never interested in academics and was eager to start working. Then I heard about a job fair by Sons Corporation, a popular real estate company, and immediately applied. The person in charge explained everything very clearly and thoroughly. I felt that the company had a bright future, and so did my own future if I worked there. I decided on the spot that I would work for this company. I submitted my resume that day and passed the interview. Since then, I've dedicated myself to this company. Mr. Anderson heard about this from other senior executives and became interested. At the time, you were only 20, but your diligent attitude and ability to harmonize with others stood out. I found myself genuinely impressed by you. I never knew I was so highly regarded. But it was my wife's comment that solidified my decision to make you president. When I told her about you, she smiled and said, "You would be a perfect fit for the next president." Seeing her smile, I realized she was right, and I made up my mind. Is that so? So please don't say you're not suitable. You are undoubtedly the right person to be president. I felt a renewed sense of responsibility. Just as I finished speaking and invited Mr. Anderson to go, I heard a faint voice from behind. "You'll pay for this." When I quickly turned around, Chris, who had been silent until now, was charging at me with a furious expression. "You!" Chris's scream echoed loudly in the lobby, but in the next moment, he was tackled to the floor by a nearby security guard. Even then, Chris kept shouting, "Let go." I slowly approached him and grabbed his face firmly. "Enough already." My voice echoed through the lobby. "Do you know how many people wanted to quit the company since you arrived? Every time, I convinced them to stay. If I hadn't, you'd be the only one left in the sales department by now, and you could have destroyed the company's future too." Seeing me furious for the first time, Chris was completely deflated. "Everything I said is true. You caused a decline in sales, and you will be held accountable." Chris, looking devastated, was led away by the security guards who held him by the arms. He was severely reprimanded and then released. The next day, after discussions with the top executives, Chris was fired due to his past behavior and significant drop in profits. Mr. Anderson informed me that Chris, unable to find a job, is now living on the streets. Despite earning so much, he has no savings and scavenges food from restaurant trash cans to survive. With his high pride, Chris is unlikely to succeed in any future job. Regardless, a bright future does not seem possible for him. As for me, since becoming president, my days have been busier than ever. Although my days are filled with work, this busy lifestyle is perfect for someone like me whose hobby is work. Of course, there are many things I don't understand, and sometimes I feel lost, but there's always someone reliable to help. President, you seem tired. Is there something troubling you? It's a very special person's birthday today, and I don't know which place to book. Do you have any recommendations? In that case, how about the small park near the company? It would be a perfect place for some nostalgic conversations. Let's go with that. We'll reminisce about old times, celebrating a birthday in a small park. I want to cherish this relationship moving forward.